So one of the key concepts that make up the 12 concepts of a healthy home and lifestyle is movement. Now, last autumn, I made myself an early New Year's resolution and decided that I really wanted to achieve 15,000 steps a day walking, or at least aim for that. So if I kind of only hit 13,000, then I'm fairly happy, but I'm aiming for 15,000 steps every day. Why? Well, there are so many studies out there showing how beneficial walking is to both your physical and mental health. I've personally really noticed a difference to my sleep and my menopause symptoms and my mental health in general after trying to up my step count to 15,000 a day. Before I was doing around about 10,000, which was great, but I feel like I've really noticed the difference just doing those extra 5,000 steps. So I'm going to try and keep it up this year. There was a study that came out last year in April 2024 that showed that if you chose to take the stairs as opposed to the elevator or the escalator, then you actually managed to reduce your risk of dying from heart disease by around 39%. And you also reduce the risk of dying from any disease by over 40%, which is huge. So with that in mind, in this week's episode, I'm speaking to the Midlife Mentors, James and Claire Davis. They specialize in helping people with movement and nutrition and just general coaching in midlife. So if one of your New Year's resolutions this year was to get in shape and you're already slightly waning a little bit as we're drawing to the end of the first month of the year, then hopefully this interview will get you inspired again and back on track. Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Healthy Home Show. And today I got with me the Midlife Mentors, James and Claire Davis, who are actually a very old friend of mine. So I feel really honoured to have you, and I follow your work, of course, always. And I think the last time we actually got to do a recording together was when I was living over in Barcelona and I had the radio show there. So it's about time we interviewed again. How are you guys?
We're great, thanks. How are you doing?
Very, very well. Thanks for having us, hon.
Oh no, it's really nice to see you guys. And so I mean, I've been following your work obviously, and I just love the fact that you guys have kind of focused yourself on midlife, because obviously now that I'm there, totally in denial of course, it's really fascinating to me how kind of like we need to adapt both our diet, our mentality, our kind of like way of lifestyle a little bit around midlife. So I really love that you guys are kind of really focusing on that and kind of helping people identify the areas that we need to change in midlife. So I know that you guys had a really successful retreat business in Ibiza. And I'm not quite sure if you're still running that anymore, but I'd really like to know kind of what made you make the transition from your more kind of corporate jobs and through the retreat business into what you're doing now, basically.
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, great question. So I guess I'd always been fascinated by human behaviour. I studied psychology, then went to do a master's in psychology, and started as a psychologist before I ran into you at Ministry of Sound. So I got diverted along the way somehow into media, and kind of followed that career until about 2011. Then I was kind of happy with it, but I just thought, maybe there could be something else out there. So I moved to Ibiza with the idea of running retreats. There was one of the ideas. So set that business up in 2012, and we do still run it today, but it was very different. Obviously, when we were in Ibiza, we were running like multiple retreats all through the season. Unfortunately, COVID shut all that down. We moved back to the UK, so now we just do a couple a year. But that was the inspiration for the retreats. And then for the Midlife Mentors, we're just seeing so many people, so many retreat clients come and present similar kind of challenges and issues. And in particular, a lot of our friends were going, it's just the beginning of the end now. There's just nothing I can do about expanding waistline, low libido, low energy. And we said, there's so much you can be doing. So that's why we started the podcast. COVID forced us to pivot then into launching the online coaching programs, and been fortunate that it grew from there to the work we do now, obviously one-to-one coaching, but also working with corporates and going in and talking to them about challenges around midlife, like menopause, low testosterone for men, balancing relationships, all that kind of stuff.
And for me, just really briefly, because obviously James has covered off the retreats and the Midlife Mentors and how that happened with the podcast, but for me, I wasn't always into fitness and health at all. I was in my corporate career, I was in PR, but I never enjoyed it. For 14 years, 15 years, was always trying to get out of it. So I set up a few businesses that I didn't really go any further with because I had such low self-esteem and massive imposter syndrome. So I'd always had this kind of entrepreneurial spirit, but never had that self-belief to go and do anything with it, even though I kind of set up some businesses and got so far, and then my little confidence just took a dive. But, you know, I became a stress management consultant. I actually qualified as a life coach at the age of 24 because I always knew that I wanted to coach people and support people and really reflect back at them how incredible they are. So there's always been that sense of wanting to help people see their potential. And so I became a stress management consultant. I became a business consultant for Microsoft and worked over in the US. But it wasn't, I didn't get into health and wellness at all until my divorce, when I was in a really dark night of the soul. I was put on antidepressants, which really shocked me, and I was like, oh my goodness, like how have I got here? How's my life ended up like this? And I didn't want to be on antidepressants for the rest of my life, so I thought, hang on a minute, you're drinking too much alcohol, you're scoffing your face, you've ballooned. And I'd always had this terrible relationship with my body. I'd been anorexic and then binge ate, and so my body shape was always changing. I had such a terrible relationship with it. So I got it sorted, and I sorted out my nutrition. I read everything I could about it, really started taking care of my body. So I'd been very spiritual, done all the mindset work, but never focused on my body. And that was it for me. I went to the gym, I started doing weights, felt very empowered. And so I was like, oh, I've got to train in this. So that's when I qualified in all of that. Left my corporate job, met James over in Ibiza, and kind of combined the mind, body and soul in the way that we do now.
Yeah, that's amazing. I feel like there's nothing like a personal transformation, is there, to kind of like really get you to change direction or get to kind of stuck into something else? Because I had the same experience basically when I was trying to heal myself from my autoimmune issues. And when I worked with a consultant, basically, I think in the end, it took about 4 weeks, no more than that. And my weight dropped from like 70 kilos basically down to 62. I mean, it was actually a little bit too rapid for my liking, but it just showed me that actually kind of small changes and a slight change in mindset basically was all it really required. Because I think we get stuck in this kind of psyche a bit, like that's forced on us by our culture, that, you know, this whole kind of weight gain, weight loss thing is such a horrible cycle to be stuck in. And I think it's actually not as difficult as people make out. And also, I think in midlife particularly, midlife has a bit of a bad rap. It's like, okay, as soon as you entered into midlife, that's it. Game's over. You can't make any changes after that. Can't teach an old dog new tricks and all those kind of things. So I really love the way that you guys kind of like look at it as an opportunity for transformation. So what are the challenges that you find in terms of mindset with people in midlife? Do you feel it's more that they're more resistant basically to change?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think by the time we've hit midlife, obviously we've got a lot more experiences in the bank, which informs our psychology. So as a general trend, we'll become more risk averse. We think we have more to lose, right? We start thinking about everything we've got to lose. When we're young, we play to win. When we get older, we play not to lose. So that's a big mindset shift to actually be aware of and adapt to. I think, it's natural we'll get more cautious. We might become more aware of the fact that maybe we're not as strong and energetic as we were, so we want to take more care. But it's the way you frame it, like anything in life. It's the way you frame it. And, midlife is an amazing opportunity. And the mistake I'd say we most commonly see people make is they focus on what we call the external. So it's that thing of like, oh, my weight, or I'm looking a certain way, so I'll just do a diet, or I'll go and do these workouts for a while, and that will fix my problems. But we're not looking at the other part of the equation, which is the internal work, the psychology, because we know that at midlife, whether you're male or female, we've got hormonal changes going on. But we also get changes to our neurotransmitters as well. So our psychology is being affected. We're likely to become, more anxious, less confident, more depressed, all these things. So we need to actually recognise that and work on our psychology. And like you said, we're culturally programmed to look for this one big thing that's going to change everything, you know, the solution, and we'll just keep hopping from thing to thing to thing. This is a mistake we see people making all the time. It's not about that. It's about lots of small changes, micro adjustments. Actually, when you add them together and over time, make huge benefits. A real simple example, and loads of research backing this up from schools of positive psychology, like a daily gratitude practice. Just remembering every day to be grateful for 3 things from the day before, 3 things in your life, for example, that changes people's psychology. You become more present. Become more optimistic. Optimists have better life outcomes than pessimists. So, you know, why not do it? It's just little things like that. When we stack them, when we combine, you know, the physical aspects and the psychological, you can actually engineer big change for people.
Yeah, amazing. And obviously you guys focus quite a lot on movement as well as nutrition, etc. How would you say midlifers need to adapt their approach to exercise and being in the gym? Are there specific changes that we need to make at our age?
Yeah, there really are. And this is one of our passions. Like you said, it's a really big part. And nothing we can do, nothing we ever do is without that movement element. Because also that movement element really positively impacts what James was just talking about there. So the mindset, when we get talking about hormones, the menopause, the andropause for men, we do know that the hormones affect us, not just physically, but psychologically. So movement really helps with our energy levels and low mood and anxiety as well. But it's not just that. We do need to adapt how we exercise. First and foremost, we don't need to go into a gym. It's absolutely not necessary for anyone to do weight training or cardio in a gym. You can do it all at home. I'd say 98% of our clients have always worked out at home with simple pieces of equipment. But what we always say is, if you are a midlifer and you are not doing resistance training right now, you must, I cannot stress this enough, start doing resistance training. Because as we're aging, our muscle mass is decreasing. This is going to cause injury when we're older, loss of flexibility, but also lower muscle mass lowers our metabolic rate as well. So if we're struggling a little bit with weight gain, this is going to make it even worse. The more muscle we have, muscle is metabolically active, meaning that we burn more calories at rest when we've got more muscle. So it's about protecting ourselves, but it's also about making sure our metabolic rate keeps it firing at a good rate. It also changes your body shape. So no amount of cardio that you do will ever change your body shape in the way that weight training will. So doing that a couple of times a week, we're not asking you to do anything fantastic, just a couple of times a week, making sure that you're doing a full body, so you're hitting a lot of, most of your muscle groups a couple of times a week. Honestly, Bob's your uncle, you'll start seeing the change in that really quickly. You'll start feeling stronger and then more empowered, and you'll start noticing a real difference in the body shape. What I would say is we also notice a massive mistake that clients make. When they are not losing weight or when they're starting to pile on the pounds, if they're used to doing a bit of cardio, they will do even more, because they're like, oh, good grief, I am piling on the weight, I'm going to do more cardio, that's going to burn more calories, that's what's going to help. Actually, that's a huge mistake to make, because us midlifers already have high levels of cortisol running through our body because we're so super stressed. We're generation squeezed. We've got everything going on at this time of life. So a lot of the time when you're doing more cardio, you're putting stress on the central nervous system and raising that cortisol. Cortisol makes you hold on to belly fat. It also affects your insulin response, other hormonal pathways. So making sure you're doing the right amount of cardio in short spaces of time, doing weight training as well, but getting adequate rest and fueling yourself properly. We're massive believers in HIIT, high intensity interval training. It sounds scary, but actually it gives you the best bang for your buck. It does. It gives you best bang for your buck, because you're doing a 15 to 20 minute session. You're raising your heart rate. You're bringing it back down. So in that working period, you're bringing it up and bringing it down. And actually, if you can do that fasted early in the morning, that gives you kind of like an even more fat burn. So we could talk about that on an entire podcast. But yeah, it's really interesting how, we do need to adapt it. We shouldn't just be following a 20-year-old Instagrammer, an influencer, because actually we have to do stuff that's pretty tailored actually to our body and our hormones at midlife.
I'm super glad that you mentioned that cortisol element, because in my own journey, basically, that's one of the things that amazed me the most. Because when I kind of made some changes to my exercise routine like 8-10 years ago, basically, when I first was trying to heal myself from autoimmune issues, I remember the consultant saying to me, "Oh yeah, you've got to stop doing." What was I doing? I was doing spinning every day, basically. And I was like doing it for kind of at least an hour and a half every day. And I was like, what do you mean? I can't stop spinning. I'm going to like put on so much weight. And honestly, I stopped spinning and lost the weight. And because basically, as you say, you know, I was kind of had so much cortisol going around my system, basically from all the stress of that I was holding it around my middle. My body thought I was in fight or flight the entire time. And so it wouldn't let go of the extra kind of fat on my body. So I was like, hang on a minute. What, you mean I've been doing all this stuff in the gym for absolutely no reason whatsoever? Well, I mean, I suppose maybe some of it's good for cardio, like as in my kind of heart health, but it certainly wasn't helping me lose any weight. So I think that is such an amazing thing to kind of point out to people, because I think we're obsessed in thinking that the more cardio that we're doing, the more weight we're going to lose. But obviously that can be counterproductive, especially as we get like a little bit older. But I was going to ask you, because you mentioned being able to just do it from home and not go to the gym, which is great in my book. What would you recommend people then use at home, like proper weights or just ones that you tie to your ankle, or what kind of weight?
Yeah, I mean, you can, first of all, if you've got a new client, you'd always just start them off doing body weight. So if you're not used to doing any resistance training at all, just using your body weight is going to be super effective. So squats, press ups, tricep dips, and then you might want to take them into filled up water bottles to get a little bit of extra weight going. And then, you can use some ankle weights. But then we progress clients to using things like kettlebells and dumbbells, and having a range of weights so that they can progress up those. And then bands. Bands are, I used to hate bands. I used to be really negative towards them and actually pretty judgy. When I used to see people using bands, I used to be like, oh my good grief, get yourself, it's terrible, but I'm going to be really vulnerable. I'd be like, get yourself some weights. They're not. Anyway, when COVID happened, I had to eat my words because I had a few kettlebells at the most and bands. And I tell you what, I still use bands, because bands for your glutes, for building glutes and nice curvy glutes is amazing. So there we are. Bands have won the day for me.
Good top tip. And James, for men particularly, actually not men particularly. I mean, I think when we think about midlife changes, we think a lot about kind of the hormone changes that women go through. But obviously men are going through hormone changes as well, which we don't really hear about so much. Can you talk a little bit about, the changes that men are going through, the challenges that you guys face at midlife? I hate it, but the midterm midlife, I keep saying that, I'm like cringing every time I say it.
It's a great question, because it is unrecognised, and I'm trying to raise awareness of it. So we call it andropause for men, and it's age-related testosterone decline. So where women have estrogen as their main sex hormone, men have testosterone. For us, that will peak in our 20s, then it'll decline between 1% to 3% a year, which doesn't sound a lot. But by the time we're in our 50s, we could be 30 to 50% lower than we were. And of course, when we get down to those levels, I think, with the menopause, it happens, it might feel like a long time. It happens in a relatively compacted period of time in a woman's life. So the changes are quite extreme and sudden. They go through perimenopause and menopause, and they can really feel these things happening. For men, it might be more that as they get to a certain age, they suddenly say, I haven't got to get up and go, my libido's not there. I'm noticing that I'm losing muscle mass, that I'm putting on more weight around my middle, I'm not as confident as I was. And all these are symptoms of low testosterone. So, as you all know from your work, there's a lot of pollutants in the environment that actually work against our hormonal pathways now. Testosterone rates are falling at double-digit figures in the Western world. They reckon around 1% per year on average for all men. So the average 20-year-old today actually has probably lower test levels than the average 50-year-old from the 1980s. So it's an increasing problem, potentially. In terms of the scale, some men might hold on to their testosterone until well into their 60s or beyond, but at some point, obviously, there's going to come a point where you start to notice the effects. important thing to say is there are lifestyle things we can do. Just like, you know, for menopause, we can be aware of what's going on. Things like resistance training for men will really help elevate testosterone levels, particularly if we lift with heavy weights. Even stuff like high intensity interval training will give us that temporary lift in testosterone. We can clean up our diet, start eliminating sugars, processed foods, move to a more whole food diet. Certain supplements, things like zinc, magnesium, vitamin C, vitamin D, support the hormone pathways, will really help raise testosterone naturally. If that's still not working, you can get blood tests, and then now increasingly testosterone replacement therapy is an option for men as well. But you know, it's not for everyone. It comes with its own pros and cons, its own risks, and it is a choice for the rest of your life, not something you go on and then come off again. So just that's something to be aware of with that.
Okay, that's super interesting. Yeah, because obviously we hear a lot around hormone supplementation for women, but not so much around men replacing testosterone. And another thing I love about the work that you're doing at the moment is also you're raising awareness around women's menopause, but with men. Because obviously you see it affecting so many relationships at our age. Basically, you hear about divorce more than anything like at the moment because, you know, women are going through the hormone changes, men don't quite know how to adapt to that, or, you know, and it feels like menopause has been such a dirty secret for ages. It's like we're all trying to kind of discover it as we go, and even our kind of like health professionals don't seem to be as up on it as some of us as individuals. So I really love the fact that you're kind of increasing awareness of women's menopause and man's andropause, and talking about it as we relate to each other. What have you found any challenges with that? What's the reception been to that?
Well, I'll let James actually answer a majority of that, because the work that he does is actually pretty phenomenal, and it's also pretty phenomenal of the corporates that he does this work in, that they're even open to discussing menopause basically with groups of men. Because what I've found is when I've done menopause workshops in corporates, when you've got men and women there, which is amazing, I personally think it's really cool that guys come to those workshops. I've pretty much had a man or a few men at my workshop that I've run around that, but it can make those men feel uncomfortable, because as a generalisation, this is a generalisation, men just feel very uncomfortable talking about women's issues, and they don't feel emotionally connected necessarily. They're concerned that they might say the wrong thing, so they just stay mute. They don't ask questions. They don't almost want to get involved just in case they say the wrong thing, which is why I'm going to swap over to James now for him to share some of the work you've done really recently with organisations around the menopause for men.
Yeah, so I'm lucky. I get to go to organisations and talk about menopause to male audiences so they can understand it, both within a work context, how they can be better menopause allies, but for their private, personal relationships as well. And it is amazing because I think, you know, there's still so much work to do. We've come on leaps and bounds with menopause information, you know, in the last 5 years or so. Like there's a load of like celebrity books, documentaries, you know, that information is out there, but it's very much being consumed by women. And I think for men, it is still a mystery. So that I get asked, you know, the guys always wait till the end to come up to me one by one and ask the questions, but they're really interested in what's going on with my partner, you know, why are they reacting? They're often feeling quite, I'd say, confused and scared, because they can see that the relationship's not where it should be, and it actually gives them comfort to understand what's going on and to go away with tools they can use to actually, you know, help mend the relationship, fix it. So on that side, I think that's really positive. With the andropause, I think I do with some women get really rejection, but unfortunately there's a certain section of women that are very much like, oh, you're trying to co-opt the menopause, that's ours, we don't want you men taking it. How dare you even think that there's something similar going on? And they just like want to shut down the conversation completely. And I'm like, look, that's not helpful. No one's saying that they're the same thing. They are completely different processes. But we have to acknowledge that they're going to happen for men and women at similar stages in their life cycle. And of course, that's going to impact relationships. So let's start understanding what's going on for both parties involved. And then we can start taking steps around it. If we just stick in our head in the sand and go, I'm not interested in what that person's going through, you're really creating a problem for yourself.
Sorry, Charlie. I think for me, I feel really passionate about this as well. I do get really frustrated when women have that response to James talking about the andropause, because it's not a competition, and the stats really do speak for themselves. Like, midlife men is the highest suicide cohort in the UK. Midlife men 45 to 55.
Top cause of death in men over 50 is suicide.
Yeah, and so us women, I believe, we also have a responsibility. There is no competition. Personally, I'm all about how can we support others, male or female. So that stat really saddens me. I know that there's a real loneliness issue for men as well. They isolate themselves more than us women, and their social networks get smaller. And that stat really, it really, really hurts me. So for James to be able to speak about the menopause and me to be able to speak about the andropause and to support each other as that male and female couple, I think is really unique and also quite powerful. And I'm very, very, very proud of the work that James does for the andropause and the menopause.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely fantastic. And as you say, it's just, yeah, we've got to work on this together. It doesn't help if we don't have the communication going, and we're all learning about this at the same time. I mean, it's quite kind of crazy that you think about the fact that we're learning about it now, because when you speak to previous generations, it's like, I'm not quite sure. I'm like, what happened? Like, that no one seems to kind of like talk about menopause in generations gone by. And sometimes I wonder whether it's because our roles have changed so much. Like, women are having to kind of work much later now, and maybe they're kind of like working much longer, and there's more stress involved. So maybe they didn't notice it as much like in generations gone by. But yeah, you're right. It's like this is about learning together, and this is about communication. So it doesn't help to be really short-sighted. But what other talking to you, Claire, I mean, obviously menopause is something that we have to experience in midlife, but what are the other challenges that women particularly are facing around midlife? Because obviously, you know, they're still raising children, potentially dealing with aging parents. I imagine that there's probably quite a lot of stress that we have at the moment in our midlife lives that maybe we didn't have so much in previous generations.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. They are unique and they're not unique. Both men and women do go through these, I suppose. But I think for women, the unique thing is if you do have children, it's different for the man and for the woman. We know that. Like, there is an identity, a very, very strong identity for women with children. They're the mother, right? So yeah, they're going out to work. They particularly going out to work. They're juggling that. They're juggling children. Aging parents, like you say, their identity is very wrapped up in giving. So they are constantly prioritising everyone else and everything else above themselves. And their boundaries suck. I mean, they literally forget how to put boundaries down at all. So that exhausts them and they become resentful. And it gets to a point, I notice with a lot of women, it gets to a point where they're like, what the heck am I doing this for? You know, I am strung out, I'm exhausted, I don't even know who I am anymore, apart from being all these different identities for everyone else. Who am I? And this becomes particularly prevalent when you have empty nesters. So when the kids get a little bit older and they don't need you as much, or they completely fly the nest, that's when women have that real identity crisis of, oh my goodness, it's not required of me now to give as much. What do I do now? And that tends to be around the time that our hormones are fluctuating, our body shape has changed. There's that whole thing again for women in society, which is, men, they grow old and gracefully, and they always look really handsome. You know, the silver fox. Women just get called hags. Like, that's our version of getting older is, we get wrinkly, we're having to do Botox, we're having to do this, holding on to our youth. Age is not celebrated for women at all. For men, it's like, oh yeah, they're becoming that silver fox, George Clooney. There are a lot of stigmas attached to us women going through midlife. There are a lot of pressures. There's a lot of that transformation with that self that really hits women, for sure.
Yeah, there's a lot of work that we need to do around that kind of beauty piece in our culture, really, isn't there? Because it's just, and also getting older. I mean, a lot of cultures kind of like look at the kind of like elderly with wisdom, you know, they're the leaders of the community. And at some point along the line, we've basically made kind of old age and kind of that the wisdom that comes with it not such a good thing, which is probably where we've gone wrong slightly in the West. But yeah, I feel as women there's definitely a lot of kind of empowerment happening around not having to keep up with the whole kind of beauty ideals of the culture, which I think is definitely a step in the right direction. But I was actually wanted to ask you a little bit around coaching, because being a coach myself, I've kind of often wondered like how you see it, in that do you see that there's more appetite for coaches happening in the UK? I feel like it's of so much benefit to basically be able to handhold people through a transformation process and be able to kind of help them make the kind of the changes in their habits and the changes in their lifestyle that help, I think, when you've got someone else guiding you. But how are you finding it out there in the coaching environment at the moment? Are you seeing more people kind of taking up coaches, or?
It's a great question. I mean, I think there's no question we had a boom during COVID, which had its pros and cons, right? I think people were stuck at home, they had disposable income. They're like, well, how can I improve myself? So they did look for coaches. And it kind of opened people up to the whole possibility of like, I can get fantastic expert coaching virtually. I think the downside was also a lot of people just went, I'll be a coach now, and just like announce themselves on Instagram as a coach with like no experience or qualifications, which has led to kind of a lot of people getting burnt. So I think for some people there's a lot of cynicism now around coaching because they've had bad experiences, unfortunately. I feel like now we're kind of coming to the other side where people are actually recognising that I do need to actively manage my well-being, whether that's mental, physical, a combination of the two. I probably don't have all the tools to do that myself, and particularly if I want to optimise my performance and be accountable, which I know is going to be a thing that's going to push me to the next level, then I'm going to need someone to hold my hand for that. So I think... if we look at the general population, I think that the mass probably wouldn't consider it, but then you've got a top percentage that really see the value and will engage in it and get the results from it. I don't know, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, like, we always invest in coaches. That's actually where a majority of my money for my entire life has gone, actually. I haven't acquired lots of things. I've acquired lots of self-knowledge and self-awareness and tools and kind of reprogramming of my mind, because I can't take that stuff with me, but I can be the best version of myself. That's an ongoing process, by the way. That's never going to happen, not fully. I believe that it's a constant journey of getting to know ourselves and healing and all that kind of thing. But I realise that not everyone is like that. And like James just said, we only want to work with those top % of people, not because they're special or because they have more money, but it's a mindset thing. That top 1% of people have a mindset of, I want to be the best I can be, and if something's holding me back, I want to know how to work through that. That's the kind of people that we attract. That's the kind of people I love to coach. I was 24 when I became a coach. That was like 22 years ago now, and I love it more and more every day, because that transformation is priceless, and we teach what we need to learn. So I always get something out of my coaching sessions. I'm always learning more about myself through my clients.
And an investment in yourself is the best investment you can make, right? And what I love about you guys is that you're so qualified in different areas. And I feel like there's a bit more of a movement towards being a bit of a generalist these days, because I think in times gone by, everyone's had their kind of like one little niche, and it's been like you either go to the psychologist and you deal with your mind, or you go to the nutritionist and you deal with that. And I think it's always been shunned a little bit to be a bit of a generalist, but actually I think we're moving into a time where looking at the holistic view of health and life in general basically is becoming much more important, because you can't look at the gut and not deal with your kind of mindset, etc. So I really love that you guys are so well rounded, and that people can come to you and kind of literally heal everything from their mind to their body. But it's really interesting to know your thoughts around coaching, because I sometimes wonder where we're going basically on that front. But obviously the work that I do. Go ahead.
If I may, Charlie, a really good example from this week actually, right? So this sums up the mindset. You've got Novak Djokovic, who's not only probably one of the greatest tennis players around now, one of the greatest of all time, but he's just hired Andy Murray as a coach. And this is where I think in the UK in particular, because we've got National Health Service, people are just like, oh, when it breaks, I'll get it fixed. Well, no, look, if you look at Djokovic, he's already like the best in the world, arguably, but he's like, I want to be better. So he's like, I'm going to get this guy and get him to coach me. And this is the type of mindset that we need to start thinking about. Like, it's preventative and also about optimising performance. Well, how do I get to the next level? How do I be better? So I just wanted to throw that in there because it's a really good, I think, concrete example.
I couldn't agree more. He's one of my heroes, actually. I just think his attitude towards gratitude as well is like really impressive. As you say, he's always curious. He's always a decent gent to everybody else. Like, he's playing with his kind of like behavior, and his kind of the way he holds himself is just like really, really impressive. So that's a great example. Thank you. I was going to ask you, because obviously the work that I do is related around how our environments and our homes like affect our health. I just wanted to ask you before I let you go, because I know that you've got to go. Where do you feel that midlifers can make a difference by looking at their homes or their environments, basically? Do you feel that there's something specific that's coming up in your coaching practices that's related to that you are trying to kind of help people change?
Yeah, I love this question. There's a few things, actually. The most important thing that comes up over and over and over again is digital. So I was doing a one-to-one coaching call with someone the other day, and actually it's kind of related to being at home, because we're constantly attached to our phones, and it's made worse now, I think, because we've got this hybrid working arrangement that wasn't around before. So people have got their workspace and their living space kind of on top of each other. Literally, some people are using their living space as their workspace and haven't separated the two. That's the first thing I would say, is make sure that you separate your workspace to your living space if you can, and you have got the areas to do that, so that when you come out of your workspace, that's it, work is done. However, that's not so possible, because you've still got your phone on you, and you're still sitting there watching Netflix and scrolling through your phone, going on your email, comparing yourself to everyone else on Instagram or whatever your social media is of choice. And so I think that environmentally is something that we must get a handle on, because we're constantly looking for that next dopamine hit. And we're going to our phones. If we're bored, if we're anxious, if we're lonely, if we're this or that, we go into our shell of our phone. And so that really impacts our home environment, because we're still bringing that into that space, let alone like the blue light that it gives off. If you're looking at that just before you go to bed, that's going to affect your sleep. Sleep's a right nightmare for a lot of our midlifers, especially us women, when we're having hot flashes. So don't take your phone into the bedroom at night. Make sure you switch that off at least a couple of hours beforehand. Switch off your Wi-Fi if you can. Don't have your phone as your alarm in your bedroom. That really annoys me, that excuse. And, like you always say, like cleaning products, make sure that you're using decent cleaning products. Listen to what Charlie teaches about cleaning products in your home. So there are so many things. Making sure that it's not too cluttered. Because again, if you're super stressful, if you've got all these things going on in your life, your environment is everything. So if you've got a load of crap everywhere, your mind's going to feel like it's a load of crap even more than it already does. So making sure that you've got things in a certain place, because we also have brain fog. We forget things. I've had this recently, Charlie, too much. Where I'm like, oh my goodness, I've forgotten where I've put that. And I'm so not like that normally. I'm like, this bloody perimenopause. So making sure things kind of are stored away in their place so that when you get those brain fart moments, that you're able to go, oh yeah, that's where it is. So yeah, there's lots of things.
Absolutely. Actually, funnily enough, I was just speaking to a declutterer and a home organizer about that very thing of like, you know, having your system set up well and having order set up well is really good for your mental health. And, you know, when you do have those moments of like brain fog or can't remember where you put it, if you have your systems in place and you're not living in total disordered chaos the entire time, then you're kind of saving your brain from having to do the kind of like the extra effort. But guys, like it's so nice to chat with you. I'm always love your company and your chat. But one last question: if you had to try and encourage midlifers basically into starting one of your coaching programs or working with you guys, where would you suggest they start? What's the most important place to start? And also, how can they find you? Obviously, I'm going to put your details in the show notes and I know where to find you, but where would you like your audience to kind of like find you first? And also, where would you like them to start?
So I think if you're going to start this journey, don't overwhelm yourself, you know, have compassion for yourself. If you're looking to make, like I say, it's not about making big changes, it's lots of small changes. So the path is going to be easier than you think, but just be kind to yourself as you start out. We just remember we've all got to start from somewhere, so just try and suspend judgment. I'd say that. If you want to connect with us, then you can find us at themidlifementors.com and on socials at the Midlife Mentors, at Midlife Mentors, and of course our podcast, the Midlife Mentors.
Yeah, and Charlie, I just want to add one more thing on that. I would say do get that support, because so many times we do this alone, and I just always ask that question: how's that going for you? Like, how is it going for you that you are trying to do this path on your own, trying to figure it out from the multitude of utter nonsense that's out there now in the world? You know, like accountability and putting yourself in an environment where you are inspired to be the best version of yourself is gold. I mean, that is the missing link for most people, because suddenly you're like, oh, that's possible. That's possible. And suddenly that person believes in you and says, you don't need to see the whole staircase, you just need to take this step. Just that step, like that step. So yeah, that was my final piece on that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, because I think, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to start this podcast, because I think there's so much overwhelm out there that it just leads to analysis paralysis, right? I mean, everyone's trying to kind of like pitch in with something different to do. And I think most of the time it just comes back to basics. And I think that's sometimes the beautiful thing about health, is that actually we've just overcomplicated everything so much. If we just go back to basics, that's where true health is. But we do need help to get there, because I think, you know, we've been bombarded with all these toxins and these different kind of like messages about things that we desperately need, from like, you know, putting 16 ridiculously different skincare products on your skin every day to, you know, all these different things that we've been convinced that we need in our life. And I think, yeah, as you say, just taking the overwhelm out and going back to basics is really important. But I think people do need help to understand what that is. And it's definitely the best investment I've ever made in my life and my health. And yeah, I think it's you learn the skills and they take you through life forever. So thank you for the work that you're doing, guys. I think it's changing a lot of lives.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's always so nice to chat with you and follow the work that you're doing. And yeah, thank you for that. And thank you for taking the time to chat with me today.
Oh, thanks for having us, Charlie. Cheers, hon.